Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to today's Morning Blast. It is Thursday, the 12th of June, all day. You join me and myself and Mr. Michael Brown for the Morning Blast, where Michael and myself will be starting your trading day with an explosive daily market preview. But before we do, let's get the legals out of the way. So as usual, nothing discussed on this space. This session constitute trading and investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed Mr. Michael Brown. And as you can tell, I'm feeling slightly better today because yesterday I sounded like I was almost dead. But Michael, how are you?
Well, very good morning, Brian. Good morning, everyone. Pleased to hear that you've perked up a little bit, mate. A sort of Lazarus-like recovery has happened there.
Well, you know me, son. You know me. It's not my first rodeo.
Oh, God, hopefully it's the last after the state you were in yesterday.
Oh, tell me about it. I know I've said this for the last 5 times, but I'm never going back to Vegas until next year.
Oh, God.
But
Oh,
what's been occurring? Because I'm not going to lie, I kind of was in a bit of a trance-like state for most of yesterday, so I'm going to be listening to hear what happened yesterday as much as anyone else.
yes, I was going to say, I imagine you had rather a long nap at some point yesterday. So,
Yeah, just a little bit.
right, let's crack on. Good morning, everybody. It was a choppy and ultimately risk-averse day yesterday, with the S&P losing about a third of 1%, giving up a relatively sizable gain after a much softer than expected CPI report. And we've seen that selling pressure continue throughout the APAC session overnight, with S&P futures down by another 0.2% as I speak. A couple of catalysts on this one. I'll leave the geopolitical specifics to Ryan, because of course he used to be an oil trader, so knows a
Oh,
thing or
stop
two
it.
about the Middle East. But there are some jitters around the situation in the Middle East. Various rumours doing the rounds that Israel may be considering some military action against Iran, and also some US personnel have been moved out of the region as well. So
I'll tell you
all
what,
of
so
the hairs have been set running on that front, it would seem.
just on this, this whole Israel may be considering, I'll tell you now, it's not they may be considering. Israel are already planning or have already considered. They know exactly what they want to do when they want to do it. It's just whether or not they pull the trigger. So all of this all these headlines suggesting, oh my God, oh, Israel may be considering to do this. That's rubbish. Israel have been planning this a long, long time. It's basically just waiting for the thumbs up, thumbs down. And it won't be the first time that Israel have moved unilaterally either. So in actual fact, we've mentioned on the show weeks ago that one of the key kind of changes we've seen over the past few years is that Israel no longer asks permission first. They will strike first and then tell the US, which goes against kind of decades of how things have used to be done. So yeah, there's a lot of people getting giddy and saying, "Oh, this is new. This is this is a new way of doing it." It's not a new way of doing it. Of course, it's a concern if they do decide to pull the trigger, and it does look increasingly likely that they will do. But the whole, this will be the first time they've moved unilaterally, or they're considering doing this. Yeah, these things are already being considered. These things have already happened before. We're just now the only concern now is do they give thumbs up to this latest round of strikes, and when do they do that?
Indeed. And but of course, rational thinking like that does not sell newspapers or get clicks on the internet. So that is
True,
why
true, true.
you've not seen that, and you've seen scaremongering everywhere. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, it has had a modest impact on sentiment. As I said, equities trading a touch lower, treasuries obviously firmer across the curve on the back of the CPI numbers yesterday, which I'll get onto momentarily, but having extended on those gains overnight. We've also started to see a little bit of firmness come into the dollar in early London trade this morning, with the dollar index looking to move back towards 98.5. And also gold is shining once more, trading up to
We
highs around $3,375 overnight. In terms of, oh, well, and of course, the other obvious move is crude. We saw WTI up by about 5% or so yesterday, briefly trading north of $69 a barrel. In terms of that inflation data, it was pretty much as cool as you could get. Headline CPI rose by 0.1% on a month-on-month basis in May, with core inflation rising by the same magnitude. On an annual basis, headline prices rose by 2.4%, while core prices rose by 2.8%, a smidgen below the expectations at 2.9%. Of course, upside price risks do remain, and we are still effectively just waiting for the the increased costs as a result of tariffs to show up in the data, but they have not yet. And as a result of the rather benign data across the board, we did see a dovish repricing of Fed policy expectations. The market continuing to fully price the next 25 basis point cuts by the October meeting, but we do now have a full 50 basis points of easing discounted by the end of the year, which obviously equates to two 25 basis point cuts, and importantly is in line with the median in the Fed's March dot plot. In terms of other notable factors from yesterday, of course, fallout from the US-China trade talks in London continued. From the Chinese side, we heard that they held candid and sincere talks with the United States, that they will continue to communicate with the US, and that they are urging the US to, quote, fulfill promises and take actions. A lot of words to say, not a lot there, to be completely honest with you. Of course, the take from President Trump was rather more triumphant than that Chinese statement. Trump noting that a deal with China is done, that the full magnets and necessary rare earths will be supplied up front by China, and that he will work with Xi to open up China to trade. The important two takeaways from this, I would argue, is firstly, there is nothing escalatory in any of this whatsoever.
Yes,
The
good point.
language is still very conciliatory. It's still towards calmer heads prevailing, and it's still towards some sort of agreement somewhere in some form being struck at some stage. The other point I would make is, in a similar vein, the tariff rates that are being levied by either side are also unchanged.
Yeah,
China still levying a 10% tariff on US goods imports. The US, now this is important because there was quite a lot of confusion around this yesterday, the US levying an effective tariff of up to 55% on Chinese goods imports. Now, there were a lot of questions, myself included, going, hang on a minute, I thought it was 30%. The reason Trump was saying it was 55% is because he's included the 10% baseline reciprocal tariff that everyone is charged with. On top of that, there is the 20% levy as a result of fentanyl. And then on top of that, there is 25%, which basically encompasses everything that was already there. So the Section 301 tariffs, the tariffs that were in place from the first Trump administration, all the stuff that we've basically forgotten about and that has been in place for the last 6 or 7 years, Trump is including that when saying the tariff on China is 55%, presumably because it's a bigger number, which he presumes makes himself sound better. But that's just to clear up some of the confusion around that 55% figure. We also heard more from Trump on trade towards the back end of yesterday. Bloomberg reporting Trump as saying that he will set unilateral tariff rates within a couple of weeks, and effectively at a certain point say that we will say to our trading partners, take it or leave it. This, to be frank, is not really news. Trump has been saying,
yeah. I was gonna say this was
as
before I was away. This was like coming surely.
Oh, well, I went further back, and actually in mid-April, Trump
There
was
you go.
saying if we can't strike trade deals, we will just give countries a number
Yeah,
as to what their tariff is, and that's effectively what they will have to deal with. So I'm not entirely sure why people are, well, very much making a mountain out of a molehill of that, to be completely honest. It is not anything new. It is very much just Trump reiterating what he has said previously. In terms of other things from yesterday, we heard from our esteemed Chancellor here in the UK, Rachel Reeves, giving the spending review in the House of Commons. Not really much in terms of market-moving rhetoric from the Chancellor, very much as we expected. She did confirm that departmental budgets will rise by 2.3% a year in real terms, and that defence spending will rise to 2.6% of GDP by 2027. Two issues with that. One, NATO wants us to spend 3% and Trump wants us to spend 5%. The second is that we are fiddling the figures because that defence spending includes intelligence agencies and it includes pensions for defence personnel, both of which are very important, but neither of which are going to be looked on particularly favourably by the Trump administration, I would imagine. Sticking with the UK, We have had the latest monthly GDP figures this morning. The economy contracting by 0.3% on the month in April. This is the first month-on-month contraction since last October, and the biggest monthly contraction in GDP since October of 2023. I would caution, of course, that the monthly data is very volatile, and actually I agree with Rachel Reeves for once, because she was saying that on the television a short while ago. The other factor, of course, is that we had a lot of one-off influences pushing GDP higher in the month of March, particularly as a result of folk trying to front-run the US tariffs and also get ahead of stamp duty changes and things like that. Of course, that would all have then unwound and paid back in the April data. And in fact, the ONS saying that goods exports from the UK to the US fell by their most on record in the month of April. In the month of April, which very much speaks to the point that the tariff front running is over. Other notable factors from yesterday, we did have a relatively well-received 10-year Treasury sale in the United States, with the auction stopping through the when issued by 0.7 basis points, and that, of course, comes ahead of a closely watched 30-year sale later on today, which, if you read some of the coverage of it, it's the most important bond auction the world
Yeah.
has ever seen. Yeah, very much a case of that being hammed up a little bit too much. On the subject of treasuries, though, there was reporting via Bloomberg yesterday that Hong Kong pension funds, they are potentially looking to cut their treasury holdings if the US loses their AAA credit rating. Now, if anyone is sat there going, I thought the US has already lost their AAA credit rating, well, I was doing the same thing yesterday. Apparently, the reason they haven't dumped them already is because they are waiting for Rating and Investment Information, who are a Japanese-based ratings
Oh,
agency, to
there you
see if
go.
they also strip the US of its AAA rating. Frankly, this is all a little bit of a storm in a teacup, really. I think there's every chance that if another downgrade was to take place, we would just see these pension plans just change their mandate and change their rules to still let them hold treasuries.
Yeah.
The Bloomberg article noted that possible alternatives include AAA rated bunds. If anyone wants to hold German debt over treasuries, then go and give your head a wobble, I think, is all I would say
Yes.
on that one. Last couple of things from me on BP. Firstly, of course, Elliott, the activist investor, still very much involved with BP. There were reports yesterday that the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, commonly known as ADNOC, of course, are evaluating the possibility of buying some assets from BP if BP go down the route of splitting up the firm and selling off various parts of it. ADNOC apparently most interested in the LNG and gas fields that BP operates and would not be pursuing a full takeover of the firm. So certainly one to watch on that front. And last but by no means least, especially for Tom Talks Cars, good morning to you, Thomas. NVIDIA, they are planning to build the world's first industrial AI cloud in Europe. Jensen Huang is to give more details on this in some remarks tomorrow, but the German-based AI factory will feature 10,000 GPUs, including NVIDIA's DGX B200
Oh, that one.
systems. Well,
Oh, yeah. That's my
and
favorite. That's my favorite.
well, it's funny you mention that because my favourite is the NVIDIA RTX PR0
Oh,
servers that will also be included.
yeah. No, that's a
Um,
decent one. I'll give you that as a decent one.
so we can play top trumps with that later,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Europe getting in on the AI act at long last. And for the moment, that's all from me.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Michael Brown. So just going to rattle off some headlines, choice headlines from the overnight news roundup that is compiled by Zach and put out on our Substack, etc. We'll start in the geopolitical area to begin with. Obviously, as we've already spoken about, there's lots of vocalization of Israel possibly attacking Iran unilaterally, which we know, as we said before, won't be the first time, and it will just be a wait and see. It's as I said before, it's not something that the US want to see happen, but it wouldn't be the first time. The precedent has already been set for that. Sources cited by Washington Post noted that US intelligence officials are increasingly concerned about the fear of Israel striking Iran without Washington's approval. Sources say they believe it's worse than any point in the past, which is odd because they have struck in the past without Washington's consent. So I would say that would be more. But whatever. Oman's foreign minister said, "I am pleased to confirm the sixth round of Iran-US talks will be held in Muscat this Sunday, the 15th, via a post on X. Let's hope that Iran is still around at that point." One thing to bear in mind with all of this is the current situation with Netanyahu himself, who has survived an attempt by opposition parties to dissolve parliament early Thursday. That's today. Basically, Netanyahu's the only reason he's in power at the moment is because of what's going on with Iran and with the Gaza and stuff like that. So, there will be some out there claiming that Netanyahu has an interest to strike Iran because it will save his job. So again, something else to throw into the mix. TD Securities has entered a tactical long gold position, it says in a research report.
Are you on a motorbike?
No, someone's just gone past sounds like on a lawnmower. This is to express lower risk hedge against potential geopolitical turmoil in the Middle East, according to the brokerage. The Pentagon, they've launched a review of the Biden era AUKUS package. So that's obviously the trifecta of the US, Australia and the UK, pact to develop nuclear powered submarines, as the Trump administration looks to shift the burden for collective defense to allies and make sure that the US has enough warships of its own. In trade news, according to various news wires, President Trump said he will set unilateral tariffs within 2 weeks. As Michael said before, this isn't new. We've known about this for a long time. US Treasury Secretary Bezant said China's trade fairs could come through reduced exports to the US or through rebalancing of the world's largest economies. Said there is no quid pro quo in terms of chips for rare earths. In US-China trade agreement. Also said the administration is committed to keeping dollar reserve currency status. China's foreign ministry said the nation will always honour its commitments when commenting on Trump's remarks that deal with China's, I'm doing air quotes here, done trade deal. Said it hopes the US can work with China to implement what was agreed between the two presidents. FT is reporting that Western companies say that China is demanding sensitive business information to secure rare earths and magnets, raising concerns about the potential misuse of data and exposure of trade secrets. Vietnam's trade minister met with executives from Nike and Walmart as part of a major charm offensive targeting US businesses, aiming to rally support ahead of high-stakes trade negotiations to avoid steep tariffs. In macro news, Texas Governor Greg Abbott said he would deploy National Guard across parts of the US, parts of the state, as protests against ICE raids have gripped Los Angeles, have resulted in hundreds of arrests spread across the country. US Energy Secretary Chris Wright said it's unlikely the country's oil production will drop next year, contrary to expectations released by the government's agency, that's the EIA. Trans Mountain Pipeline, that could handle an additional 75,000 barrels of crude a day by early 2027. Government-owned companies' top executives said, potentially helping Canada's oil producers expand shipments to non-US markets. Moving down the list, Fitch Ratings revised its 2025 outlook on North America non-financial firms to deteriorating from neutral, expecting high tariffs to stoke inflation and dampen consumer ability to spend. What else we got here? China lifted the official yuan midpoint to the strongest level in more than 2 months on Thursday, but not as firm as the market projected. Japanese borrowers have sold more corporate bonds in June than in more than in any June in the past 4 years, with 1.26 trillion yen worth of bonds issued through June 11th. UK economy, as Michael's already alluded to, shrank for the first time in 6 months, falling 0.3%. Obviously, Rachel Reeves blaming everyone but herself for this one. Thai exporters and importers risk more than $600 million in added annual logistics costs, and congestion worsens at the country's main deep sea port, driven by surge in shipments ahead of potential steep US tariffs. Equity names, Oracle raised its annual revenue growth forecast, betting on robust demand for its cloud offerings from companies deploying AI, sending shares up more than 7% after the bell last night. Samsung Electronics and Nvidia will take minority stake in Sklid AI. What's wrong with using normal names, people? Yeah.
I thought Pony AI was bad, but
Well, no, Pony AI isn't bad. Pony AI is great. We all know this. Pony AI is the AI company of choice for PIQ and Michael Brown. But moving on.
It's also doing bloody well.
Well, this is it. If only we'd have actually backed it when we said let's just back it because of the name. But anyway, the one that got away. Anyway, Sklid AI, as they seek to bolster their work in emerging consumer robotics industry. Sticking with AI server shipments will top 1.8. Sorry, I'll start again. Will top 1.81 billion units this year, while high-end AI servers with HBM memory, that one, on board will surpass 1 million units, up 40% over 2024. That's according to DigiTimes research. Google is expected to be the biggest buyer of high-end AI servers, while Microsoft will hit highest purchase growth at 80% year on year. Oracle also expands fastest for the Stargate project. Bung is close to receiving decisions from Chinese antitrust authorities on its 8.2 billion purchase of Glencore backed at Viterra. According to Bloomberg sources, roughly 2 years after the bumper deal was first announced. That's one for obviously commodity names. Ivanhoe Mines slashed its output guidance for this year and withdrew an estimate for 2026 after restarting underground operations in part of its flood-hit copper mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Jack Ma, his Ant Group international unit, is planning to apply for stablecoin licenses in Singapore and Hong Kong. According to Bloomberg, it seems like everyone's getting on board the stablecoin bus at the moment. And finally for me, Airbus SE, they've predicted the global commercial aircraft fleet will double in size to almost 50,000 planes over the next 20 years, spurred by rapid growth in markets like India, where a rising middle class increasingly takes to the air. I tell you what, just one because it's UK based. Tesco's PLC sales increased more than expected as the supermarket chain sold more premium and own brand products. And that's it for me. Back to you in the studio.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. Two things from me before I get on with the day ahead. The first is whoever's trading gold this morning is clearly listening to the Morning Blast, because we're down about $30 since we started talking about how all the geopolitical stuff is
There you go.
slightly overblown. So Ryan and MB moving markets on a Thursday morning. The
Standard.
second is actually a correction from me, courtesy of young Thomas. Apparently the NVIDIA RTX PR0 is actually the RTX Pro. And I can't read a headline. So
Ah,
apologies for
yes.
apologies for any confusion that may have caused. Clearly,
Yes.
we're so up with the AI theme that I did that deliberately just to test that people were paying attention.
Hang on, the thing is,
Anyway,
didn't I do something similar with H20?
I think you did, yeah,
Yeah.
which makes it 10 times worse.
Ah, winner.
Oh dear. Right. In terms of today then, the European session is relatively barren in terms of data releases. We do have a ridiculous 8 ECB speakers due though between now and lunchtime, which is quite frankly farcical, and I can't imagine any of them are going to add particularly much in terms of the overall policy outlook. As for scheduled events and data releases at 1:30 this afternoon London time, 8:30 in the morning on the east coast of the States. We do have PPI figures due out of the US. Headline PPI is seen at 2.6% on the year in May compared to the 2.4 that we saw in April. Of course, this comes after the benign CPI inflation data that we got yesterday, and will also be used to fine-tune estimates for the PCE print that we get at the end of the month, and that is, of course, the Fed's preferred inflation metric. Also at 1:30 this afternoon, we have the weekly jobless claims data out of the United States. Initial claims seen at 242,000, down from a prior 247. That 247 was actually a cycle high, so worth keeping that context in mind. Continuing claims for the week to the 31st of May, they are seen at 1.91 million, up from a prior 1.904 million, although do of course also bear in mind that neither the initial nor the continuing claims print pertains to the June non-farm payrolls survey week. As for other notable events, of course, as I mentioned a moment ago, we do have a 30-year Treasury auction at 6:00 this evening, $22 billion worth being sold off in the most important Treasury auction that the world has ever seen. And in terms of earnings today, before the market open, we hear from Hooker Furniture, included just for Ryan's benefit. And after the market close,
Whoa,
we hear
whoa, whoa,
from
whoa, whoa,
Adobe.
whoa, 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 whoa. Slanderous comments.
It was too good an opportunity to miss.
Oh my days. Oh my days. Moving on.
Adobe after the close, and that's it.
Oh, well, on that note, oh, I now need to get you back at some point. Okay, right, okay. Oh, okay. Well played, Mr. Brown. Well played. Listeners, please remove the last 30 seconds from your minds. And yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow. I'm a bit shell shocked that Michael went that far, but yes, great. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Farewell.